And there's a lot to sort of unpack there because, like I said, you know, we've now got established that that is still our Justice League. The most recent bit of DC Entertainment is Peacemaker, right?
Hmm.
And their finale included a Justice League, and these are still our Justice Leaguers, okay? And it's interesting because there was a quote that came out this week that I thought was interesting. All right. It came from Casey Bloys, who basically sort of runs the show over there at HBO Max. And he was talking about how one of the top priorities Ann Sarnoff had when when the DC universe was kind of getting remanaged and reshuffled was to kind of have things be a little more organized, have a more coherent plan. Because remember, with all the power changes in 2016 and
Hmm.
2017, whatever plans had been in existence leading up to Justice League had been thrown out the window. And through the different regime changes, there was lots of uncertainty about what was going to stay, what wasn't, what is the roadmap. This has been a slow moving, soft reboot for the last 5 freaking years.
Yeah.
And so Casey Bloys was in an interview was talking about the priorities of trying to put this all together in a way that actually makes sense. And I want to read that to you because I feel like the Peacemaker cameos are part of a bigger picture that kind of show that, like, wait a minute, there is a coherent sort of shared universe happening after all. But here are the quotes. So Casey Bloys told the Hollywood Reporter, one of the things that Ann Sarnoff has been big on is trying to make DC work in a more organized and integrated way. I wasn't there before, so I don't know how things were done. But since I started at AX a year and a half ago, we spent a lot of time talking with Toby Emmerich and Walter Hamada and Jim Lee at DC, and we're trying to be mindful about how all the pieces work together. In my estimation, it feels very well organized. That's something that was very important to Anne when she started a few years ago. So now, the reason I think that this all kind of comes into play is this. I've been hearing for the last 2 years, and it's something I talked about on this show for a while, that Jim Lee and the multiverse, the concept of the multiverse is something Jim Lee has believed very strongly on, and ever since he took over as president of DC. And that's a big deal because he was influential. He was integral in having Ezra Miller's Flash show up in the Arrowverse, in that Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, where he wanted to establish that those Justice League, those DCEU characters are connected to what you're seeing here in the Arrowverse. And that's why he had Ezra Miller come face to face with Grant Gustin's Flash. And I assume there's going to be a bookend to that cameo in the Flash where Grant Gustin is going to show up. Because again,
Right.
Jim Lee, they're really banking heavily on this multiverse concept, right? And we know that Andy Muschietti said all kinds of things about the way the multiverse is going to work in the Flash. So when you factor all that in, when you have the cameo where Ezra Miller showed up in Arrowverse, now he's shown up in Peacemaker, and now we know that later on this year, when there's a Flash movie, there's going to be all kinds of other stuff where the other heroes are involved. It kind of gets you, it gives you this idea that there is a sort of roadmap, that there is a sort of game plan, and that things aren't just kind of happening sort of, smack dash,
Right.
and things aren't just being, because at certain times it would feel like DC was just throwing a bunch of things at the wall and seeing what stuck.
Yeah, the
That
days of
was
a
starting
million random
to kind of,
announcements are over, hopefully.
yeah. But now we're really starting to get a sense of like, oh no, there is someone at the at the helm here, and this is going to pay off in some pretty interesting ways, And I'm going to just continue with a second part of Blois's of comments. Actually, no, this is from Toby Emmerich, just talking about the way HBO Max will be working with the big screen stuff too, because Peacemaker is a good example of that. Emmerich added, HBO Max presents a huge opportunity for DC. It allows us to make high quality, mid budget superhero movies that reintroduce lesser known DC titles while also crossing over standout characters from our bigger films into original series. So clearly he knew about he was kind of foreshadowing the Justice League arriving in Peacemaker. Connecting the DC cinematic universe with Max gives our fans more ways to explore the DC multiverse and more chances to enjoy more great stories with these beloved characters. So it's kind of just cool to see this idea of the synergy between the movies and what's going on HBO Max and what's going on over on the CW, and kind of getting a sense that Jim Lee and company are actually working on something pretty damn cool, something pretty coherent, And like even that little, did you get a chance to see that highlight clip that came out right before the Super Bowl? The world needs heroes.
The world needs heroes.
Right? That was an awesome little 1-minute clip that came out that it highlighted 4 particular things. And it highlighted the Batman, it highlighted Black Adam, it highlighted the Flash, and it highlighted Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. As if these are the things you need to be paying attention to in the coming year, because these are the big 4 DC things happening this year. And first of all, what did you think of the highlight reel and the way it seemed to tie all these projects together?
No, I thought it was like a nice little present for fans almost in a way, just because we've had so much uncertainty and just to really they always do the DC fandom every year, and that kind of is the big celebration, but this was a nice little thing to say, hey, this is what's on the horizon, look forward to this. Then like you said, we couple it with Peacemaker and that little crossover there, and it just says, hey, we want your eyes locked on DC, we want you on CW, we want you on HBO Max giving us subscription money, and we want you spending money at the theaters, and you need to be locked into our ecosystem. We have a plan now. We're confident. Yeah. We're showing you clips of movies that are actually filmed and actually done. We're not just announcing projects that are just going into the ether. So it's a statement from them. And you know what? Listen, all those little clips look great. And I'm excited. I'm very excited after that period of uncertainty. I know some people are sad that maybe the Snyder storylines are not continuing, but like we said, the characters are here. They're not just erasing everything. So
they're not.
It kind of lives on. It might not follow his blueprint, but they're there. So there is that still foundation. You can still look back and say, hey, Zach brought us these guys originally, and really peppered them out into the DCEU. So
yeah,
I think it's I want to be positive about it. I know some people will just kick and scream no matter how hard they want, but it's a good thing for all fans. I really think it is. It's the best way forward. It's gonna pay off, guys. Just these things take time. These are huge Titanic ships that we need to turn around. So,
and I really patient. I think it really says something though too, that about how the folks running DC currently view those older DC movies. The fact that James Gunn was able to bring that version of the Justice League into this hugely successful current DC property shows that they're not trying to hide these guys. Right. Or they're not trying to act like those movies didn't happen. It's the fact that they got approval to use these versions of the characters, to use that artwork, to use that feel and look. And it kind of shows you, it gives me hope that in the Flash, these versions of the characters are going to be given their proper due. Because a lot of people, I feel like a lot of the concern people have is is the Flash is going to nuke everything and have no regard for what came before? And I don't think they are. I think, it looks like they're finding a way to honor what's come while putting a new twist on things and pushing towards the future. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting, though, that to me was almost misleading, is when you're looking at the World Needs a Hero little video that came out, it keeps jumping between you see Robert Pattinson's Batman along with Aquaman, along with Flash, along with Black Adam. But we know full well that the Matt Reeves Batman is going to exist on its own, and that there really is no intention or plan to cross him over with any of these other heroes. So that was the one thing I thought. I'm they're almost pulling a fast one, because it seems like he's part of that same world, but he's not.
Yeah. I don't think anyone should read into that. I think it's just saying hey, all these things coexist. They're here. It doesn't mean that they're all interconnected, but they're there. This is all for you. this is all our properties and it's all of our things to
Yeah,
enjoy.
but to me, believe it or not, that's still like the weird, interesting thing in all this. The fact that Matt Reeves gets to be the only outlier in all this because he got his Batman movie at a time where there wasn't, where there was a vacuum of leadership, where no one really knew what was going on at the very beginning of 2017. Ben Affleck just knew he was out. He was not interested anymore, and he could see how they were about to overhaul Justice League, and everything was still massively up in the air. And that's why Matt Reeves got to be able to like get his creative freedom sort of clause in his contract to do this Batman movie exactly as he wants to do it without any sort of DCEU connections of any kind. But meanwhile, if he would have gone in for that same meeting like 1 year later, they would not have approved that plan. You know what I mean? The people who are in charge now would probably not say, hey, why don't you make an entire DC series that has nothing to do with everything else we're trying to plan? So it's just an interesting little like footnote in all this is that Reeves gets to be on an island, but it's specifically because of when he went to pitch this movie and the position DC was in when they asked him if he was interested, because it wouldn't be happening otherwise.
I was also just thinking, I mean, kind of interesting that maybe it's also that like it shows what faith that DC and Warner has in the Batman property, where they do think that it can be its own standalone thing, whereas maybe they don't feel as strongly about, I mean, it's just a way to look at it, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Flash, and that people are only interested if it is part of some kind of connected thing. Whereas they know Batman could really live life on its own. So that's just an interesting angle to look at it. I don't know. I could know what's in people's heads, but it just, but it's, like you said too, it's definitely because at the time stuff was just up in the air and they were like, we need something for people to get excited about and to do something like really, art house and knock it out of the park.
And speaking of things that might not have happened except for other decisions that were made. Like, we spoke earlier about how like James Gunn got on Peacemaker and Suicide Squad because Disney fired him, right? Well, in a slightly sort of similar way, the fact that Aquaman somehow got filmed before they decided to blow everything up. Aquaman got filmed before Justice League's reshoots happened, before so many things that went on to happen. People have pointed out, like our friend Rick Shu over at Batman on Film was always quick to point out, and I have to give him credit because he was the first one who pointed this out, that based on Justice League's box office, if they were going to decide just based on that, whether or not to proceed with any of these characters, they might not have made an Aquaman movie. Because Justice League opened to like $90 million. It was a calamity when that came out. But the fact that it was already in the can and they had to try and like make the most of it just kind of shows it like, damn, it's interesting how that worked out. Had it not been for the sort of super rushed, sort of poor planning of the DCEU early on, we might not have gotten Aquaman. And then who knows, they might have done a much harder reboot after Justice League, if not for that. But they couldn't because they hear that they were sitting on James Wan's Aquaman movie. So like, wow, we can't really just nuke this thing. We have to find a way to keep it alive. So it's just, there's so many interesting little steps along the way. And that's something I kind of want to just float out there here for those of you watching the show. From time to time, Brett and I are going to do episodes that are just like long form on one topic, kind of like we're doing today so far. But like there might be times where we may want to just go do a full look at the DCEU's first 4 years and just unpack all of the insane things that happened there. And from time to time, we're going to do long forms on one topic. So keep an eye out for those episodes. But okay.